First Coast's most accurate forecast from the First Coast News Weather Team, certified by Weather Rate, sponsored by AC Designs.
Hello, everyone. We have a lot going on in the tropics. Nothing too concerning, but of course, I wanted to bring you an update. First and foremost, you might notice that the area off of our coast now a medium chance of tropical development. So that's the bigger update as of this morning, as of the 8 a.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center. Thank you for joining me. I'm Meteorologist Lee Southwick. So here's an overview. 2 areas that we are watching, 1 system, actually a tropical storm named Dexter. Dexter is actually the least of our concerns right now. So I'm going to first start with the area right off our coast, since that is our update as of this morning. Over the next couple of days, it could start to spin. You see it out there, maybe becoming a tropical depression. So the National Hurricane Center has given it that medium chance of tropical development within the next 7 days. And a very low 10% chance in the next 2 days. But really, it's Friday into the weekend. That's when it could start to get its act together. Models are a little uncertain if it's going to actually form or not. So this is the GFS model, the American model. And it shows that in the coming days, it could start to try to spin that low pressure system, trying to organize some, but really not a lot going on, just the heavy rain still for us and for a good portion of the southeast coast. The European model, same thing, kind of shows it trying to organize, trying to spin, maybe forming a closed low off the coast of the Carolinas, but again, not too promising. So that's why it's only a medium chance of tropical development. Now, whether it develops or not, it is going to bring us rain. That is the first thing, and first and foremost, really, we have a heavy rain risk. So this system that could form, it's along a stalled frontal boundary. That stalled frontal boundary is going to sit over us, and that is what's going to continue to pump moisture into our atmosphere. And then especially with the sea breeze collisions, we get the heavy rain each and every day, today, tomorrow, all the way through the weekend. There is a heavy rain risk, which does mean that there's a risk of localized flooding, ponding on the roadways, maybe some water collection in those low-lying areas. But that risk does increase over the weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. With this system that we're watching here, if it becomes a tropical depression or not, it will bring us that heavier rain, especially through the weekend. So localized flooding risk, it's a low risk each day through the work week, and then it kind of pumps up a little bit Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Also, if you have any beach plans, just keep in mind we have an elevated rip current risk with this system too. So today's a moderate risk of rip currents, but we could see some higher risk of rip currents too as we head towards the end of the week and into the weekend when a lot of people want to be at the beach. Also, there's elevated rain risk, the rain chances too that we'll watch out for. So when all is said and done over the next 5 days, you can see there are higher rainfall totals along the I-95 corridor and out towards the beaches. Also, really all along the southeast coast, there's higher rainfall chances and rainfall totals, I should say, especially off the coast of the Carolinas, because that system, notice here, when you see that X, that's where that low pressure system starting to form, likely going to move to the west a little bit over the coming days, but then by the weekend, it is expected to lift north. So if something forms, it will likely be more impactful to the Carolinas than it would to us here on the First Coast. Still not writing it off completely, but just letting you guys know, especially if you have any interest in, say, the Outer Banks. This is something you still want to watch very closely. So yes, it'll kind of drift west towards us in the coming days, but likely move to the north around that time, that if it strengthens, if it organizes, that would happen again over the weekend. Okay, so this other system, this tropical wave moved off the coast of Africa. This is in the main development region where we usually see systems form this time of year. It has a 50% chance of development within the next 7 days. It's not happening in the next 2 days. It's really a week out that we could start to see some more organization with this system. Models completely disagree on what's going to happen. So what I'm going to show you next is it's model comparison. So you're going to see isobars, those circles, that's closed low. That would be where a tropical depression, tropical storm, or hurricane would be. One takes it out north into the Atlantic, and one takes it closer to the East Coast. So all I'm showing you this for is that there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to this system off the coast of Africa. So follow those red circles. That's the general area where this would be. Notice by this point we're talking August 10th, still nothing that's actually formed. Remember, it's a 7-day outlook that has the medium chance. It's 7 days, 7, 8, 9, 10 that we would really start to see this system form. So as we head into August 13th, 14th, 15th, then you have a little bit better isobar closures. That would be a system that actually forms, develops tropical depression or stronger, maybe a named storm. The GFS is in blue. It has it right off our coast. The European is in yellow, and that's way out in the Atlantic. So all of this is to say that, yes, likely something will be forming from that tropical wave moving off the coast of Africa, but where will it go? How strong will it be? There's no model agreement there. So all we can tell you is that, yes, we're watching it. It will likely become something, but where will it be? We don't know. We do not know yet if it's a threat to us. We're watching it closely because obviously the GFS keeps trying to bring it a little bit closer to us, but we hope for the European outlook to be correct because it would turn it north and take it way out into the Atlantic. So I'm going to show you that model comparison one more time. Again, it's the red circles. So as it moves across the Atlantic, when it goes north, that's the European starting to turn it to the north, while the GFS continues to take it towards the Lesser Antilles and towards the Caribbean. And then 10 days out, that's when we could actually have a system out there, whether it's off our coast, whether it's in the Caribbean, whether it's out in the Atlantic. We just don't know yet. So we ask you to keep checking back in for updates. We need models to start to agree to come up with a path for this system and the strength of it too. So just over the next 7 days, keep checking back in. We're, of course, watching it very closely, and we'll bring you updates on that system. But as mentioned, it is out there in the Atlantic. That is what's normal for August. We're usually watching systems out in the Atlantic, and then you can see they can go in a couple different paths, and that's why models right now are taking it all over the place. The European model is the one that's the arrow, obviously going up into the Atlantic and further away from us. That happens when the high pressure ridge over the Atlantic breaks down. And so a high pressure ridge, if it blocks it. So as that system comes through, it can't turn to the north if the high pressure ridge is there. So the European has it falling apart, and then it can go north into the Atlantic. The GFS is thinking it's one of those systems that will more head into the Caribbean or maybe towards Florida because it keeps that high pressure ridge strong, and so it can't move north, and so it just keeps moving to the west and then eventually towards Florida or the Gulf or the Caribbean. So that's typical for this time of year. We will see which one plays out. Of course, we have a third system out there that we are watching. It is Dexter. Dexter is a tropical storm with winds of 40 miles an hour. You can see it is far away from the coast, and it is continuing to move away from us. It is weakening some. It's starting to get sheared. So you see how elongated it is? That's wind shear. Wind shear is bad for hurricanes and tropical systems. We like wind shear. So it's starting to shear it apart, and it will likely start to become not a tropical storm. It will become subtropical or post-tropical as it moves out into the Atlantic. And so again, by Friday, it's a system out there with winds of 50 miles an hour, but it doesn't have those tropical characteristics anymore, and it moves away from us as it continues to get sheared. So we like to see that. As we head into August, this is normal, really, to see the increase in storm systems and the possibility of storms. But the peak is September 10th. But by August, you can see right there that we get an increase in systems. So we've had 4 named storms. We have 2 other areas to watch right now, and models are spinning up stuff out there beyond these 2 areas that we're watching, because again, it's August, so this is normal to start to see an increase, and it's especially this time of year that you should probably check every day for any updates on the tropics. We are, of course, watching it every single day, every hour, and bringing those updates to you multiple times a day. So as we head through August, just a friendly reminder that hurricane frequency does pick up. And as we approach September 10th, that is the peak of hurricane season. So we will likely see more and more named storms. We'll likely get a hurricane out of this soon too, within the month of August as we head into September. So here's a look at all the storms we have had so far, 4 named storms. Our next storm name will be Aaron. Whether it develops or not within these 2 systems, time will tell. Again, with that system that's right off our coast, it looks like it could be a tropical depression. Doesn't really show signs of strengthening into a tropical storm right now, but we're watching it closely. So the higher likelihood of Aaron would likely come from that tropical wave that's out there in the Atlantic off the coast of Africa. So Aaron is the next name on the list. That would be the E name. That would be our 5th named storm. For us, we have those higher rain chances. As mentioned, whether that tropical depression forms off our coast or not, it will continue to bring rain to us. It's a stalled boundary, really, that's pumping that moisture in. And so we have higher rain chances each and every day. But with the increase in moisture and that tropical depression out there, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we'll likely have an uptick in rain chances, rain coverage, and the amount of heavy rain that we could see. Heavy rain, tropical rain. It's blinding rain. I personally, driving on 295 yesterday, hydroplaned. It's very scary, very heavy rain out there. So just be aware of that, obviously, this week. But then again, as mentioned, Friday, Saturday, Sunday looks like the heavy rain risk increases, the localized flooding risk increases. Our temperatures are at least near normal in the lower 90s, and looks like the heat would increase later next week as we'll start to see rain chances go down some. But again, there's a look at your tropical update. So again, 3 things that we are watching out there. We have Dexter, which is a tropical storm, but it is moving away from us. So that is good. We do have that area off of our coast, which now, as of the 8 a.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center, has a medium chance of tropical development. That's a 40% chance. So it's possible that a tropical depression could form. Again, the low pressure system could move west in the coming days, coming a little bit closer to us, but it does look like it will likely move to the north by the weekend. Any sort of big tropical depression, tropical storm concerns, a little bit higher for our friends in the Carolinas. So if you have any interest in the Outer Banks, watch that one. And then for that system off the Atlantic, we will watch for it to move into maybe the central Atlantic and not be our problem or our concern. That's what the European model says. That's what the models say. Or you have the GFS, the American model, bringing it a little too close to home. So there's just a lot of uncertainty with that system that we'll have to keep watching out for. Again, with that system several days away. So we are 7 days out, 50% chance. It's not happening in the next 2 days. So our near-term focus is going to be the system right off of our coast, maybe a tropical depression by the weekend, and whether it forms or not, just expect those higher rain chances. Then beyond that, we will watch that tropical wave out there in the Atlantic, 7 to 10 days. That could be a concern for anyone, whether it's ships out in the ocean or it's here at home or to land. We'll be watching that one beyond that. And Dexter, not a concern to us, not a concern to land in the United States because it is moving away from us. So thank you so much for joining us. This was your update as of Tuesday morning. We will be back again tonight with another tropical update that we hope you join us for.
It's the 2025 hurricane season, and the National Hurricane Center has made some changes and improvements to the way warnings are issued and disseminated. This ranging from the size of the cone to the way we collect and distribute data from inside a hurricane. I got to talk to the National Hurricane Center Director Michael Brennan about these changes. So here's a look at that full interview.
First and foremost thing on top of people's minds, as we head into the 2025 hurricane season, let's say I am somebody brand new to the Gulf Coast of Florida. What do you think are just some of the main things that they should, and I know it's a broad question, but you kind of, what are some of the main things that you think they should be ready for, prepare for, they should have in the back of their mind as we head through May and into June?
Yeah, for somebody who's moving to a hurricane prone area the first time, you really have to start out by understanding what your risk is. Do you live in an area where you're susceptible to storm surge? That could be on the coast of Duval County. It could be along the St. Johns River. Or do you live inland and freshwater flooding from heavy rainfall is your biggest threat? Everybody's susceptible to wind impacts and tornado impacts. There's also the threat of rip currents along the coast. So it's really about understanding what the risk is where you live and developing a plan to keep you and your family safe based on that risk. So the most important thing is to find out if you live in a storm surge evacuation zone, because if you do, you could be asked by local officials to leave your home. You need to have a plan for how you're going to leave, how you're going to go, where you're going to go, how you're going to get there. And it's important to remind people that you don't always have to drive hundreds of miles or out of the state of Florida to get to a safe place in advance of a hurricane. You really just need to drive out of that storm surge evacuation zone and get to a safe place, a shelter, the home of a friend or loved one, where you can safely ride out the storm. And that might only mean driving 10 or 20 miles inland away from that storm surge threat to get to a safe place. And the other thing is, again, identify your home structural risks. Are you in a mobile home where you might be asked to leave even for a tropical storm? Are you in a flood-prone area that might need to be evacuated near a creek or a stream? And then finally, you want to think about supply kit. You want to have a disaster supply kit handy, not just for tropical storms and hurricanes, but for any other emergency. Multiple days of food, water, batteries, medicine, charging devices for your phone, and just ways that your equipment and supplies that you're going to need to be self-sufficient for several days in the aftermath of a storm when you might not have power.
And to kind of carry off of what you were just talking about, as far as getting prepared, especially if a storm is right on your doorstep. I know last year we started with the experimented cone graphics, and this year you're carrying on them again. Is there any changes from last year? And could you talk about maybe some lessons learned from last year, especially since we did have multiple storms that had impacts well inland?
Yeah, you're right. The experimental cone, this is an example of it from Milton last year. We rolled that out in August, so it was around during Helene and Milton in particular, two of the more impactful hurricanes we had, both of which made landfall in Florida. So the experimental cone shows the extent of tropical storm and hurricane watches and warnings over inland areas. And you can see that in this case, almost the entire Florida peninsula was under some type of tropical storm or hurricane watch or warning. And again, showing that wind risk extends well outside the cone itself, which only tells you about where the center of the storm might go. You can see that Milton was a pretty big storm by the time it got to the Florida peninsula, brought those impacts over a wide area. So we got a lot of positive feedback about the cone, the experimental one last year, so we're continuing it this season. The only real substantial change is this area where we have a hurricane watch and a tropical storm warning in effect. We added a little more clear legend about what that means, this pink and blue hatching area. But overall, we're going to continue it this year. Have it available on hurricanes.gov, continue to gather comments and feedback and decide how to make any additional changes or whether to make it operational after the 2025 hurricane season.
And I guess to even carry and build on top of that, because another thing that I noticed in our press release here was that the cone is getting smaller. So can you just touch on, I think most people understand that means, the forecast is getting more accurate, but can you just touch on kind of what goes into the cone of air and to kind of build even more on top of that with a smaller cone? What do you think are some of the forecasts? Because I've seen this personally, the forecast challenges that go with a smaller cone of air and communicating to the broader public.
Yeah, so the cone really represents the likely path of the center of the storm. So this is the forecast for Milton here across the Gulf and across Florida and in the Western Atlantic. And these dots represent our official forecast of where we expect the center to be. And then the cone tells you where the center will be about 2/3 of the time. But it's based on our track forecast errors over the previous 5 years. So we had a pretty successful year for forecasting track in 2024. We set record low errors on average. So as those numbers come into the calculation and we drop off the earlier year, the cone is going to be about 5% smaller. So really not a huge change, probably wouldn't even be really perceptible to most people. But it does indicate that on average, track forecast errors are a lot smaller than they were, say 20 years ago. If you look back at a cone from 2005, it's going to be much, much bigger. It'd probably cover most of the state of Florida. But that does create a messaging challenge in the fact that, people need to realize that the cone just tells you where the center is going to be, likely. It doesn't tell you where the impacts are going to be. So the cone cone is just sort of a broad scale look at where the center of the tropical storm or hurricane is forecast or is likely to be. The watches and warnings and the other information for wind and storm surge, flooding, tornadoes tell you about the hazards. It would be really difficult, if not impossible, to indicate all that hazard information on a single graphic. So that's why we have different graphics that convey those different hazards and what those risks are.
And speaking of graphics and hazards, that really builds right into my next question, because, and this is actually a question not only for the general public, but also for me, the broadcaster. From your experience, what do you, because I could show somebody a satellite picture all day, and the big storms, people more or less ooh at it. They go, ooh, it's pretty. It doesn't translate to on the ground. So what do you think is some of the most important things as broadcasters we should be doing to help relay some of that vital information? Because the cone is great, but, the Safford-Simpson scale, but I don't think sometimes that translates to storm surge. So I'll let you take it away, because I assume you know where I'm kind of going with this, but it's a hard time sometimes relaying some of that vital information.
Yeah, the focus really needs to be on the hazards. And a lot of times those are covered by watches and warnings, like the wind ones you see here, the storm surge watches and warnings that highlight areas at risk for life-threatening storm surge inundation, flood watches and warnings, tornado watches and warnings. So again, because those hazards really vary in time and space during a storm, you have to focus on those hazards individually, but then also, collectively for the entire storm, for everybody, say in your viewing area, which includes people at the coast, people inland. They have different risks. So people need to understand what their risks are and really seek out the information that's related to what their risk profile is, or where they live, or where their business is located, to make sure they can get that vital information. The good news is that we can push information to people too. When we issue a storm surge or hurricane warning, that triggers a wireless emergency alert on people's cell phones based on where they're located. So if the warning is in effect for your area, you're going to get notified of that. People need to find their trusted sources of information, their broadcast meteorologist that they watch every day, who's going to be able to help guide them through the information that's coming out during a storm, which can be somewhat overwhelming at times because there is a lot of information, not just coming from the National Hurricane Center or your local National Weather Service office, but in the larger sort of media ecosystem that includes not just traditional media, but social media. So it's important for people to have those trusted sources of information, find them now so that they're not looking for them during a storm.
And I'll jump into this question here, as I heard you mention the different ways things are getting pushed and social media, and you kind of already answered it, but just kind of ask in a broader scope. You started what, in 2008 or late 2000s, right, at the NHC? What do you think from your perspective as relaying that information and the public's perspective is the biggest change in the way they get the information about hurricanes, but not only that, the way they kind of process it? For example, I know evacuations used to be a lot broader back then. Now it's a lot more concise. So just from your perspective, what do you think in the last almost 20 years has been the biggest change?
Yeah, I think, well, the way people consume information is rapidly changing. You live this every day. You're in traditional media, and there's still a lot of people that, especially in an emergency like a hurricane, turn on the television and watch their local television stations to get information. So we still try to get information to them through the media pool, through the broadcast meteorology community. But we also know people consume information on their phone. Some people don't ever watch television anymore. They have apps, they have social media. So we're trying to push information out through places like live streams and other social media platforms, short videos, to, again, we're not going to get we're not going to be able to provide someone every piece of information they need about a hurricane in a 1-minute reel that we're going to post on Instagram, but we can at least raise awareness and then encourage them to go seek out information through some other channel by coming to our website, looking to their local media, connecting with their local government officials. So it's a way to try to reach people where they are and then try to point them to places where they can get more comprehensive information. So again, you're right, we can provide a lot more detail now. You go back to when I started here at NHC in 2008, we didn't have a watch or warning for storm surge. We weren't able to highlight those areas specifically at risk of life-threatening inundation. Now we can, and as you mentioned, evacuation zones have become a lot more refined. It's not just a whole big chunk chunk of a county. Now it might just be one small piece of a barrier island or an area along the St. Johns River. So as information has gotten more precise, in some ways it's become a little more difficult for people to consume and understand. So we just have to keep making sure that we can get our voice out there with the authoritative information, and that across sort of the weather and hurricane enterprise, we amplify those sources of authoritative information, whether it's coming from us in the National Weather Service or from state and local government officials that are telling people where to evacuate and how to get ready for an event.
Ah, thank you. And one other question I had here, and is almost on the line of improving technology, is that nowadays we have drones coming in off of planes. We have the sail drone out there. How are these new different recon and areas of technology improving your forecast?
Yeah, a lot of it goes back to the data from the Hurricane Hunter aircraft. So, for example, you can look, here's a radar picture from one of the NOAA Hurricane Hunters flying through the storm out over the ocean where we don't have radar data. All of the ground-based radars are on land. So this is getting us data here that's giving us a view of what the storm looks like from the inside for our forecasters to look at. But this radar data, the precipitations, the structure, the wind field, is all getting into the forecast models that help us predict the track and the intensity of a storm, which then directly plays into where the storm surge is going to be, the heavy rainfall, the wind. So all the aircraft reconnaissance data that come from the Hurricane Hunters going into the models improve those track and intensity forecasts by about 10 to 20%. And that's really been a big change in recent years. And it's also helped us to improve our forecast of rapidly intensifying storms. And if you look back at, say the storms from 2024, we had Helene and Milton in particular that both underwent rapid intensification before landfall. We're out and now actually able to make some of those more aggressive intensity forecasts that we wouldn't have been able to make, say, in 2008 or 9. We just wouldn't have had the confidence to forecast a storm to strengthen by 30 or 40 miles per hour in a 24-hour period. Now we are able to issue those more aggressive forecasts, which get us into the right expectation for setting the level of what types of hazards people might have to be dealing with the storm.
Wow. Thank you, Michael. One last question. Is if there's anything I haven't may have mentioned here for you that you think that heading into the 2025 hurricane season, that people absolutely should be at least aware of as we get ready for this upcoming tropical year?
Well, that it doesn't take a hurricane or a major hurricane affecting your area directly to cause substantial life-threatening impacts, especially from freshwater flooding, from heavy rainfall. Has almost nothing to do with how strong a storm is from a wind perspective. A tropical depression, a weak tropical storm can produce life-threatening flooding. And that's been the biggest killer in the United States in tropical storms and hurricanes over the last 10 or so years. It just matters how hard it rains and how long it rains in a particular location. And the other thing I'll touch on is just post-storm safety. We've seen a substantial number of post-storm fatalities in recent years in tropical storms and hurricanes, especially after major hurricanes. When you have long duration power outages, you think about the aftermath of a hurricane in Florida in August or September with no power. It's going to be really hot. People aren't going to have air conditioning. People succumb to heart attacks, other medical issues, just accidents that occur from cleaning up or driving around in an environment after a storm. We lose a lot of people to car accidents. So it's just a reminder that you don't want to just survive the storm itself. You need to also survive the aftermath, and don't come back to evacuated areas until you've been told it's safe to do so by your local officials.
That's a good point, because we always seem like we always prepare for that first wave, and then no one really thinks about the weeks afterwards. So really good point there, Mike. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me here, Dr. Brennan from the National Hurricane Center. I know you got a busy day, so I'll let you get about it. But yeah, thank you so much for taking and answering a couple of my questions. I really appreciate it.
Great to talk to you. Thanks.
Thanks.